there inside their system. And if you think about what we may have here in North America, including Canada, because there's a section in the book about Canadian disappearances, these issues don't stop at the border. But if you think about, we'll always think, okay, so we have grizzly bears in parts of British Columbia and maybe far northern portions of the U.S. We have black bears and brown bears in the rest of the U.S. and some mountain lions and things that could be taking the people. Okay, that's here in North America. But then what's going on in Malaysia? What's going on in Australia? Because they don't have those things. There's no grizzly bears in Australia. There's no big black bears taking people in Australia and Malaysia. So how could this be going on in other countries, almost an identical mimic to what's happening here? And then you have to keep an open mind on this. And in all the research I've ever done involving anything, if you enter it with a hypothesis, you're going to miss what's obvious. And people have always told me, Dave, your opinion is important, but it's not important for others to hear it. And you're better off allowing people to develop their own thoughts and their own hypothesis once they've read the literature. And I think it's important. I'm not trying to sell the book at this point. I'm trying to tell you that once you read the same sorts of stories over and over again, and Fish and Game people say, no, it's not a bear. No, it's not a mountain lion. And yeah, this was the strangest case I've seen in 33 years because I can't tell you what did do it. And biologists come in and they say the same thing. Again, not opinion. These are all just facts. Once you start leveraging the crypto world versus the missing people, pretty soon that's the only thing everyone out there hears. Dave thinks it's this. Oh, he's a whack job. Oh, this, oh, that. And then pretty soon people don't want to talk to you. That's it. And then the other missing people say, oh, yeah, I heard about you. You believe it's this. And we don't want to be involved in that. And the reality of it is I don't have any idea what's causing this. There are some parallels with other things, but I'm not so much to be closed-minded to say there's something very strange here. Yeah, and this is one of the few black people that I ever write about. His name was Chris Tompkins, and he was on a survey crew. And he was, again, the last person in line of a crew on a rural road, and he was standing on the shoulder of the road, probably within 10 feet of a barbed wire fence. And as they're walking along, you got to understand there's no curves in the road. There's no nothing. They're walking on a long, straight road back to the truck. It's like 200 yards away. Everybody's tired. Everybody gets back to the truck. They look back. Chris isn't there. They walk back, and what they find is a series of coins on the ground right next to the fence, one of his boots laying on the ground next to the fence, and small pieces of his blue pants that he was wearing on the fence. So everybody put your investigator hat on for a minute. You got one boot on the side of the fence. You got materials from his pocket laying on the ground. How does this happen? With my own investigative experience, I know that when I work fatal traffic accidents, if a citizen is in a crosswalk and they get hit by a fast-moving car, sometimes they get knocked right out of their tight shoes that they're wearing on their feet. It doesn't seem possible, but it happens. And it's something about the human body going limp and the movement being so quick that they come out of it. Now, I'm not saying that this happened with Chris that quickly, but the indicators of things in his pocket being on the ground, meaning he was turned sideways at the very least, if not upside down, before he went over that fence. So he disappears. It's obvious he went over the fence. What's on the other side of the fence? Inhospitable country. Woods, snakes, swamps, almost impassable ground. So they do a search, they find nothing. 6 months later, the rancher that owns the ground on the other side of the fence, 900 yards on the other side of the fence, they find his boot, and that's it, laying next to a swamp by itself. Chris has never been found. And the owner of the survey company was upset. He's a friend of Chris's mom's. It was a big deal in the South, and there was a lot of allegations back and forth. And if I was the parent, not knowing what I know now, I might have some allegations that these guys did something bad to my son. Knowing what I know now about shoes coming off, about people disappearing near swamps, etc., it fits what we know about odd disappearances near woods and things of that nature. Why in the heck would his other boot be so deep into this abandoned, horrible area unless something very, very strange happened? And you know what? I guarantee you there are a lot of spooky, strange areas with noises that you hear at night that are just scare the heck out of you. But unbelievably, there are none. None. You could almost write a book just about Florida and Texas. There are so many strange, odd disappearances down there. Now, we've started to look at the cream of the crop coming out of Florida, and so people sent us some cases that are just completely baffling. But you may hear from me in the future about Florida specifically, because there are some really, really odd things that go on there that would defy common sense, as we've spoken about tonight. But nothing out of Louisiana. You know, one of the things that we stayed away from was water-related deaths, because we wanted to take the equation of drowning away from what we were doing.
Sure.
And so it's possible that what you're saying is true, but it wasn't something that we wanted to tackle at this point. And I think that for a drug dealer, a meth lab, or somebody growing weed up there, the last thing they want to do is draw attention to an area they're in. And so by abducting somebody, killing somebody, that's really one of the last things they want to do, because what it's going to bring is hundreds of people and helicopters and surveillance. They don't want that. The other part of the equation is that many times there are adults. Say Polly Melton disappeared in Great Smoky Mountains. She wasn't a small woman. She was, I think, 5'6", 5'7", weighed 160 pounds. I'm 6'1". I weigh 200 pounds. I run every day and I lift weights. If I tried to grab Polly Melton while she was fighting me off on a trail and carry her away, that is almost a mere impossibility for me to go more than 20 to 50 yards without putting her down and having to rest. And if you think about it along those lines, where there's nothing found, someone's going to fight with me, there's going to be buttons that fall, there's going to be shreds of clothing, there's going to be hair. You're fighting for your life. None of those things are found. There's no screaming heard in a majority of these cases. There's very little heard. And to have that super kind of human effort to carry somebody away, because that, in most instances, that's what it's going to take. That's why, to me, it takes that avenue away. Unless it's a very small child, and even a 40, 50, 60-pound child, the idea of carrying them miles and miles and miles under your arm while you're walking, it's a hard thing. Well, and it's not consistent with the injuries that you see on them. The injuries are more consistent with almost as though they're going horizontal through the forest, because the scratches on them, when you can get down into the details, many times the scratches don't go from front to back, they go from top to bottom, if that makes sense to people. So if you think about that, a small child, say a big man carrying a child under his arms, that's almost what I visualize it to be many times. Other times, the person's found and there's just scratches, and the articles and the people say they were just scratched from head to toe. So the bird idea has been brought up to me many times. And in fact, in a crypto sense, because there's some people that believe that there's large flying birds out there that sometimes carry animals and things away, and why not people? And along those lines, again, if you get into the minutia, the details of it, it isn't consistent with the injuries. The people, the abduction experts that write to me and say, do you realize that what you're writing about is almost verbatim as to how an abductee feels after they're released? You know, there's that continuum where they don't remember, they don't have any, there's a loss of time, they don't remember how they got anywhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would be outstanding to get a group of these people in a room and allow them to go through hypnosis and understand what happened to them. But from our perspective, and we've been warned of this early on when we walk down this road, we have to be very, very careful with how we approach people that have been victimized in this way. Many people will say that if we go forward and we ask them to do this, etc., and then we write about it later on, they're being victimized the second time and we're profiting from their loss. So if people came forward and they wanted to learn more, somebody read our books and said, boy, I'd really like to understand what happened to me. I mean, we're right there. I'll help them. We'll do anything we can to find out what happened. But it's tough for us to be the proactive one and go out and reach out to them. There's a series of disappearances right on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. But one of the best ones involves an older woman named Gloria McDonald in an area called Queen Wilhelmina State Park. She was hiking with her husband, her son, and her son's girlfriend. And this is right after a major storm, and there was a lot of blowdown in the area. The family took off. Gloria was wearing a bright, bright yellow raincoat. They walked into the woods until they came down to a huge tree that crossed the trail. She told her husband, hey, I don't want to cross that thing. I'm just going to go back to the car, grab my purse, and visit the gift store in the park. They said, okay. So they kept walking. She turns around and walks back. When the family's done, they come back to the car, and there's her purse and all of her valuables still in the car. They ask around in the restaurant. She's not there. A huge search goes on. She's never found nothing. Nobody ever. In fact, there were some people in the parking lot that said she never came off the trail. And there was nobody else on the trail at the time. Now, the interesting part about this and several other of the cases that I write about is that law enforcement on this case focused on the husband. And this makes no rational sense to me because there's a girlfriend and the son there. They focused on the husband and thought that he did something to her on the trail. And they got detracted, and they worked on him, I guess, for about a week and a half until finally he took a polygraph test, passed it, and he was wiped off the suspect list. In the meantime, Gloria McDonald is still out there in the woods somewhere, never found. Except the majority of the disappearances around swamps, the people are either eventually found alive or dead, and it's not that they're never found. And the unusual aspect of swamp disappearances that I tried to explain, I probably didn't do too well, is that the majority of the times the kids specifically are found in areas where search and rescue is dumbfounded that they got there. So it isn't that they disappear near swamps, it's that they disappear and are found in areas that are unexplainable. Or they cross the swamp area and are found in another area and they can't explain how they got across the swamp. So, yeah, disappearances near the swamp, I see how you could come to that, but people are eventually found. It's not that they disappear permanently near there.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Yeah, I guess the point would be the same was with reports of bears. You know, bears do eat people on occasion. Gators do attack and eat people on occasion. But there's other kinds of physical evidence that's left that's does not appear in these cases. So the blanket explanation doesn't work.
Yeah, unfortunately not. There's one case out of northern Minnesota that falls in that eastern side. Corey Kelly was hunting in the Red Lake Wilderness. Friend left to go get some supplies. Corey was there with the friend's dog and his rifle. They were hunting grouse. His friend came back about an hour later. He was gone. An extremely swampy area, huge reeds. Massive search. They don't find Corey. It starts to snow that night. Hamper search efforts. So they wait a few months. The sheriff flies over the area in a helicopter. They find him 14 miles away, naked, laying in amongst a group of 8-foot-tall reeds. His gun was never found. The majority of his supplies were never found. The dog was found 2 weeks later. It slowly made its way back to the campsite, and they flushed the dog system. They didn't kill it. The dog lived, but they found deer inside of its stool. And I got the sheriff's reports on the Corey Kelly incident. It's one of the bigger narratives in the Eastern book. It's one of the greatest whodunits I can figure out. I think I've never heard of a case where two people together hunting disappeared. one person alone hunting, I have several of those cases, and they're some of the weirdest ones you can imagine. So I don't necessarily think having firearms is a big deterrent. One case specifically, two boys are playing in the backyard. One boy comes in the house momentarily. The grandmother comes into the backyard, and she hears a scream. She runs towards a creek in the backyard, and the scream gets further away. She runs as fast as she can. Scream gets further away. This is a little tiny boy. I think he's 3 or 4 years old. And he's outrunning the grandmother until finally he disappears. This is one of those kids that's found dead in a swamp way in the middle of nowhere weeks later. And that screaming and further away, your knee-jerk reaction is to think, well, it's an alpha predator, it's a bear, it's a mountain lion, it's something like that. But there's no blood, there's no nothing. And when the kid's finally found, there was no obvious signs of even trauma. And therein lies part of the other element in these books, is that when the people are found, many, if not 99% of the time, the verdict of the coroner is they died of exposure. Another one you hear all the time in the old days is they died of exhaustion. In fact, one thing I didn't bring up that people have pointed to as a cause, and I got a very blunt, a very assertive email not too many weeks ago, saying that we were idiots that we couldn't recognize this, but that the obvious factor is reptoids were taking these people. And I don't dismiss anything on an email I get, but I'll ask a lot of questions. And I went back at them and I said, well, point me in the direction where somebody's seen these, somebody's dealt with them, somebody has some proof, somebody can show me a picture. And then he says, well, if you can't see what's right in front of your face, you'll never figure this out. And I'm not trying to minimize the person's feelings. I'm trying, every time I ask a question like this, no matter who it is, trying to understand where their belief system was grown from.